Welcome back to another episode of The Football Chemist, where we use data to go through football's biggest talking points without boring or confusing you with all of that technical jargon. Today we'll take a look at whether Anthony Elanga can turn Newcastle United into Champions League regulars. The Magpies have agreed a £52 million fee with Nottingham Forest for the 23-year-old, who has shone in the Premier League thanks to his recent consistency. But how does Elanga fit into an already talented Newcastle attack? And is this a sign of Eddie Howe changing his tactics ahead of the new Premier League season? Let's get into it. So Anthony Elanga has already caught the attention of many people in the Premier League thanks to two very consistent seasons with Nottingham Forest since he signed from Manchester United. But what are his pros and cons? So first things first, Anthony Elanga is very, very fast. He's actually clocked a 100-metre time in under 11 seconds. And this is so useful on the football pitch, especially if he's playing in a counter-attacking team like he did with Nottingham Forest and put this to great strength. This helps him become a consistent attacking threat, as we have seen with his goals and assists over the last couple of seasons. And when we look at his statistics a bit more closely, we can see he's very good at shooting, and his shots on target percentage is one of the best in Europe. And not only is it one of the best in Europe, but it's actually second in the Premier League across all of last season. As we can see here, he is only behind Jørgen Strand Larsen, and he was even ahead of Erling Haaland. And whilst this doesn't always directly correlate into goals, it's a sign that he is good at finding the target, and we could see him potentially becoming a more natural striker or a more natural finisher should he be in a system where he gets more shots compared to how he was playing for Forest. But whilst he's got potential to be a more modern winger who cuts in and directly gets chances, he also excels at the more traditional stats, such as his crossing. As you can see here, he was fourth in the league last year in terms of the most crosses created. And this is very useful for a club like Newcastle because they got a striker in Alexander Isak who is very deadly in the box, both in the air and on the ground in terms of getting onto crosses and getting those finishes. And this is why Newcastle was so desperate to get someone like Elanga into their team, because we know Newcastle like to cross the ball and score headed goals, as we've seen over the last season, and you could just tell that by looking at the height of their team. And despite being fifth in the league for the most crosses, Newcastle didn't really have an individual player in their squad who could be providing crosses, because when we take a look at this graphic here, we can see no one's really excelling in their crossing numbers. Anthony Gordon is top, but he was over 50 fewer than Elanga, for example. Fifth on this list is Sandro Tonali, who's got no business being that high up in terms of crossing numbers, given the position he plays. And if we take a bit of a closer look here, we can see that is almost lacking a bit on the right, because Gordon and Hall are first and third, but the options on the right flank, Murphy and Trippier, are second and fourth. So they're actually behind their counterparts on the left in terms of crosses and putting in good crosses for Alexander Isak. And part of the reason for this is because of Gordon's style of play, where he likes to cut in more because he's a naturally right-footed left winger who wants to get into the box. And we can see this more when we take a look at his heat map here. And you can see the extra reddish-orange colours in that left half space where he's trying to cut into the box, especially towards the final third. And we can see a big presence on that very left-hand side of the penalty area too. But then when we compare that to Elanga's heat map, where we can see him a bit more all over the place because he played a bit more on the left and the right last season. But if we primarily look at one side, we can see that he's not getting into that far right bit of the box as much as Gordon was on the left side, because Elanga is a more traditional winger who likes to hug the touchline rather than driving into the box, and it's from these positions that he can put in the most lethal crosses to provide chances like that. And Isak can benefit directly from this. Last season, 4 of his 22 non-penalty goals were headers, and this was his highest return for headed goals in any season that he's had in senior football. And this is backed up by the fact that Newcastle were 5th in the league for headed goals last season. So this is starting to show that Newcastle are going for a more aerial threat in terms of getting their goals, especially from their striker. Don't get me wrong, they'll still play with their traditional style of play and tweak their system in terms of their opponent. But if they want to establish themselves as a bigger team, they're going to come across more teams who will just play a low block against them. And perhaps you need an aerial threat or something a bit different to break down these stubborn defences. So should Elanga come into the starting 11 straight away, it's most likely that we'll see him come in on the right wing instead of Jacob Murphy, as you can see here. And in this scenario, he'll be providing direct competition with Murphy for that one right wing spot. But there's also a small chance that we could even see Elanga played in the middle, which he did on occasion for Nottingham Forest last season. And we can see Eddie Howe maybe adopting a 4-2-3-1 formation with Elanga in the number 10 alongside Murphy in the squad and maybe someone like Joe Linton dropping to the bench. But as you can see here, Newcastle already have a very talented right wing in Jacob Murphy, who provides so much to the team and often flies under the radar. So how does Elanga stack up against Murphy, and can he take his place in the team? So first things first, even if it is just one or the other in the starting 11, both will be incredibly important to Newcastle's season because they desperately need depth if they want to challenge in Europe and domestically this season. Because we can see over the last 3 seasons what happened in the 23-24 season when they were playing Champions League football. We saw a big dip in their league form, and they cannot allow this to happen again if they want to be consistently in Europe. Therefore, Elanga adds depth, adds rotation to Murphy, adds rotation even to the players on the left side, and so a bigger squad means that they can challenge in the Premier League, in the Champions League, and in the domestic cups. So it is really a no-brainer for Newcastle to try and expand their squad. But at the same time, only one player can start at a given time, and both players will want to establish themselves as Newcastle's number 1 right winger. And when we take a look at them head-to-head in some of the key stats, we can see for the raw shooting stats at least, Murphy seems to have a bit of an edge over Elanga. He's slightly better with his goals and his XG, as we can see here. But interestingly, Elanga's better off with his shots on target per 90. And this can suggest that Elanga is better at getting into those positions where he can get shots, and he's perhaps more of a natural forward than Murphy is. But either way, it looks like there's not much to split these two in terms of their product in front of goal. So let's take a bit of a look at their assists as we go down this graph a bit. And again, it looks like Murphy is leading on the more superficial stats with his assists and even his expected assist, where he does have a slight edge on Elanga. Not by much, but still a slight edge. However, Elanga makes this back in his goal-creating actions. And this suggests that whilst Murphy is better at creating chances directly through his passing, Elanga is also able to create chances with his dribbling or his off-the-ball play and getting those non-traditional assists, but still creating goal chances, as we can see by the extra goal-creating actions here. And this is a bit more obvious when we take a look at the more in-depth stats for chance creation, where Elanga is edging out Murphy for his key passes and his carries into the penalty area. And this suggests that either by passing the ball into dangerous positions or just directly carrying the ball into dangerous positions, Elanga's got the edge on Murphy. But we also can't deny the big difference in passes into the penalty area. But again, not all passes in the penalty area are equal, and Elanga's key passes suggest that his passes tend to be more potent when he does go for them. However, one big positive that Murphy has over Elanga is his off-the-ball work. He's absolutely wiping the floor with him in his tackles, blocks and interceptions, key defensive stats, and especially a team like Newcastle, who you'll imagine will be progressing higher up the pitch as they become a more established side at the top of the Premier League. They will need forwards who work hard off the ball and put in the tackles like Murphy can do so well. And it is a bit surprising that Elanga is performing so badly on these stats because he played for Nottingham Forest, a team who did not dominate the ball at all. They were 3rd lowest in terms of average possession last season. But at the same time, these stats don't show the full story because anyone who's watched Elanga can see his energy in pressing the ball high up the pitch. And whilst he may not always get the tackles like the stats show, he does have that energy and does have that potential. So when you stack the two up side by side, it's obvious that both have their strengths and both bring a lot to Newcastle. But what if I told you there's a way that Eddie Howe might be trying to bring both of them into the same team? And just like the answer to England's left-back crisis, the answer for Newcastle might be to play 3-4-3. And Eddie Howe did experiment with this a couple times towards the end of last season, perhaps showing that he was trialling it ahead of the coming season. So why don't we take a closer look at how Newcastle could work with 3 in the back. So over here, I've got how Newcastle would have liked to have lined up last season without injuries. And it's in Eddie Howe's traditional 4-3-3 formation, where you've got Murphy here on the right and Isak and Gordon in the centre and on the left. Now, unfortunately for Newcastle, their starting centre-back, Sven Botman, missed most of the season for injury. So Fabian Schär came in, and he did a very good job for Newcastle as well. He had their 3rd highest minutes last season, and he also topped their stats for blocks and interceptions. So Newcastle had this system last season, and we saw, like I said before, Gordon cutting in, Lewis Hall was overlapping before he got injured, Murphy coming in as your more traditional attacker, and Isak in there as well to create the chances. Now, Newcastle could just go back to 4-3-3 and just simply swap Elanga in for Murphy like this. And we can see him doing a similar role to Murphy where he's getting into those clinical positions. And you can see maybe Hall getting the ball out here on the left flank, crossing it in. Either Isak can head the ball in or Elanga can tap the ball in, whatever works. Or we can see Elanga doing what he does best, staying out wide and providing the crosses as well to Isak. So Newcastle now have two different sources of crosses from either side. So that's how Elanga can work in the 4-3-3. But you're here to see why 3 at the back could work for Newcastle, because what they can do is similar to last season where either you've got Livramento or Hall at left back. They play Livramento as the left wing back, but I'd imagine it'd be Hall now that he's fully fit. Botman comes into the team. Hopefully he'll be fully fit as well. And Cher can drop in the middle, Botman on the right. Dan Burn, very capable as left centre-back, did a very good job for England there as well. And then Murphy comes back in as your wing back. And we might see Joe Linton drop to the bench as well, which wouldn't be too surprising because Newcastle have been trying to dial down his minutes a bit, and Tonali and Guimaraes then become a flat 2 in midfield, and they get a more narrow front 3, Gordon, Elanga and Isak. And as I mentioned before, Elanga seems to be the more natural shooter between him and Murphy. So this could be really key in terms of Newcastle creating more chances, because if Elanga is in this 3, he's going to be directly creating chances. Murphy can do the width stuff and he can provide the width, or if Newcastle are feeling really adventurous, even Elanga can drop wide. Murphy can even underlap to create chances. Because a great thing about this formation as well, if I just move people back into some more normal positions, is it gets the best out of a lot of players. Hall is naturally quite an attacking left back. He'll relish the chance to bomb up and down. Dan Burn, like I said before, he's played in the left and the back 3. Cher is a very marauding centre-back. He can drop into midfield in possession. And you can almost play this midfield 3 here. 3 very good ball-playing midfielders or defenders even, and that can be very lethal. And Newcastle were actually linked to João Pedro before he made the move to Chelsea, which shows that Eddie Howe was looking for a more versatile attacker rather than an out-and-out winger, someone who does have a bit of shooting potential, just like Elanga. So this even suggests more that he might be going for this 3-4-3 formation rather than his traditional 4-3-3, because where would João Pedro fit in alongside Isak? But the key thing here is it gives Eddie Howe options, and he'll need a lot of options to adapt to playing the extra matches next season and playing against very different opposition. And whilst Elanga could come into the 3-4-3, or he could just be rotation for Jacob Murphy, he just gives Eddie Howe so much more flexibility going ahead, and it's the kind of signing Newcastle need if they want to consistently be a top 4, top 5 team. But what do you think? Newcastle fans, are you a fan of Elanga's signing, or do you think it's a bit too much for a player who's still yet to be proven at a top club? Let me know what you think in the comments below, and please give this video a like if you like what you've seen. Please consider giving this channel a subscribe too if you want to see more content like this, because it really helps with the viewer metrics. And whilst my work's getting a bit busier now, I'm going to be trying to put out videos every week if possible. Also, give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok if you want to see some more short form and behind the scenes content, which again will be ramping up over the summer. I'll see you next time.